of it. Welcome to the broadcast. Today we're tackling an important question. Why does self-improvement so often feel overwhelming? Shouldn't it be exciting, passionate, full of progress? It is self-improvement after all. The goal of this episode is to reframe how we approach self-improvement. We'll look at how modern content and that environment of attention systems relate to the maladaptive, unhelpful approach some people have towards self-improvement. Then we'll look at a more helpful approach through the lens of a show in a book called All the Light We Cannot See. And I've put these two pictures up here because I think they do a great job at representing what exactly self-improvement is like. Self-improvement is all about progress. You're stepping out of your comfort zone. And I think this can be related to going into a forest, especially during winter. So imagine you go up to the mountains, you're by yourself, and it's the middle of winter. Self-improvement is like stepping out of your car by yourself with no GPS, and you have to find your way through the forest. And so it's important to have that base foundation of understanding that self-improvement is inherently hard. There's no cheat code, there's no shortcut, but the growth is in the pain itself. What I'm trying to bring up to the table is to make that self-improvement journey easier. That while we're finding our way in the forest and it's cold and it's dark and it's wet, we have a fire. That's what I'm adding today, the fire. So that when we leave outside of our comfort zone and we're learning to be self-reliant, to gain new skills, we have some place of comfort. We have reassurance and surety that everything will be okay. And I want that to sink into your mind, to imagine that feeling of being dark and cold and hungry, walking hours on end in a forest in the middle of winter, and then think to yourself, what would it feel like to find a nice warm fire and nestle up close to it? And what I'm proposing is that feeling is something that we can carry in with us. An attitude, a frame of mind that can carry us forward day in and day out along our self-improvement journey. So let's get into it. The premise of today's discussion is pursuing progress in two methods. One is a push and one is a pull. To represent the push motive, we have content and attention systems as the example. Now, I thought of this just a couple weeks ago. I'm new to content. So I've been researching and learning, and I've been really struggling lately because I haven't resonated with a lot of the teaching and the systems that a lot of creators promote. I found that a lot of the techniques that creators were using in order to gain attention, to have retention, and to sell their products was they were using coercion. They were motivating people in fear, surprise, a feeling of FOMO. And don't get me wrong, it works. People will hang on to your word, people will buy the product, and people will stay to watch their video. But think of this. Have you ever had a moment where you've doom scrolled, say for half an hour? I want you to think and ask yourself, what was your feeling, what was your state of mind after you finally put down your phone? For me, I've had those moments. And I know that whenever I end those doom scrolling sessions, I put down my phone and I don't feel very good. I feel disoriented. I feel confused. I feel lost. I feel a little lethargic and pathetic, honestly. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it can be related to our self-improvement journey. The parallel is whenever we're motivated to do something for our self-improvement, but in the wrong ways. If we go to the gym because we hate our body, Imagine approaching your self-improvement, every habit, every act you do in a week, only motivated by coercion, being pushed to do something. Whether you're motivated of fear of not making it in life, of fear of not wanting to be a failure, whatever it is, being pushed out there. And then think, what is the consequence? What is the state of mind and frame of mind, the result of those motives? You may get the job done. You may have gone the whole week going to the gym and eating healthy, but your self-talk throughout that week wasn't positive. The lesson here is that it doesn't matter just what we do, but why we do it. That has a profound impact on the way things run. because it influences your state of mind, your emotional state, and I argue influences the permanence or lack of whatever change you're trying to implement. And so when I'm being coached as a creator to never have any dead space or to hook the audience in the first 3 seconds, to animate my voice, to draw in the client by adding a time-bound sale, whatever it is, those are all tactics of trying to chase. You're chasing the person, you're reeling them in, all to have their attention on you. And for the audience, for the consumer, these all create mental states. Mental states where you feel pressure, where you feel urgency, where you feel fear. And those mental states may get you to act, whether it's to watch the rest of the video, to buy the product, or if it's controversial, it may spark a comment. But I think the long-term impact from this approach isn't helpful. It's as destructive as a negative self-talk shaming someone into going to the gym. It may get the job done, but over time it proves more hurtful. And so I want you to self-reflect, to take a moment to think about your current approach and relationship with self-improvement. How are you doing? Is it something you're currently pursuing? Have pretty good habits that you're doing well in? Is it something you want to do but are failing? If you're trying to improve yourself and you feel oftentimes in a negative state of mind, I think you could probably tie it to some form of coercion within your thought processes. Thinking about why you do things and why you think about things will reveal that answer for you. I'm in the self-improvement journey. I'm fully committed to it, but I found that my days fluctuate. Sometimes I'm in a great frame of mind. I'm excited. I'm passionate. I'm hopeful. I believe that I can do this. And 3 hours later in the same day, I feel like I'll hit rock bottom. Like there's just no way, can't do it. Obviously, I'm still going to try, but I feel fear that I haven't made it and that I can't make it. And so what I've been trying to do is figure out what creates those emotional states. Because self-improvement is hard enough. I'm reaching out of my comfort zone. I'm in the winter, I'm in the snow, I'm in the forest. I don't know how to find my way. And it feels like sometimes I'm making it harder than it needs to be. The alternative is bringing the fire with us. Bringing the fire with me along my journey. So that as I'm wandering, as I'm figuring out myself outside of the comfort zone, I have some sense of security and safety. And so after you've self-reflected, taken the time to figure out what exactly prompts those negative frames of mind for you personally, let's go on the other side to look at the more positive outlook and what creates that. For this, I have another case example, and it's based on the book and the series, the Netflix series, called All the Light We Cannot See. It's a fictional book, but it takes place in World War II era. And guys, I love it. I'd highly recommend it, even if you don't read the book. I haven't read the book, but watch the Netflix series. They did a really good job. There's one aspect of this show that's really cool. It covers a journey of 2 kids. One of them is a French girl who is basically a fugitive within the war, and the other is a German boy who gets recruited into the army to fight. And it shows them both as kids listening to this broadcast. The radio was new at the time, and so it was a big deal. And there was a professor that would come on most nights in Europe during that time. And he wouldn't talk about the war, what was going on in the world, but rather it was a very peaceful and calm station where he would talk about light and dark and beautiful and true things. And from the scenes that it showed in the movie, it was really cool. The professor had a nice, soothing, calm voice. It was low and slow, and he'd play Clair de Lune through the speakers. And there's some shots of the children sitting in bed, just with their earphones on, feeling comforted by this broadcast. And I want to relate specifically the professor and his broadcast to the better side of self-improvement. What it would be like to carry with us a fire in the winter, the snowy journey of self-improvement. Think of the world during the time of World War II. Think about what it would have been like to turn on the radio, to look at the news, how many of the conversations with friends and family all circulated around the war, And what mental state did that create? Obviously, there was a lot of noise. And what I love about the professor in his broadcast is that he didn't add to the noise. Rather, amidst the noise, amidst the despair, the confusion, the fear of what was going on in the world, he added clarity. He added orientation. The reason I recommend watching the movie is because you can feel the environment that he was able to create in his broadcast. Everything we think, we feel, we do, we talk about creates an environment. It's like a mental state. And the professor, he was able to create a mental state in his broadcast. And it's crazy because the only medium he had to do it with was audio. There was nothing tangible. There was nothing even visual to look at. But through the audio alone, he was able to create an environment that was safe, that was uplifting, that was inspiring and calming. And you can relate an environment to your mental state. As we're going in the journey of self-improvement in the wintry forest, I want my environment and my mind to be clear. I want it to be focused. I want it to be calm and engaged and ready. And so if the professor was able to create a positive environment for those kids and all of his listeners with just one medium, imagine what we are able to create with all the mediums we have. If you don't have a positive mental state, think about what environments contributed to that. How clean is your home? What music do you listen to? What words do you say? How do you take care of your body? What do you eat? Those are all inputs that create an environment and influence us. So that's the first lesson that I personally gained and wanted to share about the professor and his broadcast. The second lesson is to be motivated by inspiration. Aspire towards something greater rather than to be pushed from behind. And that approach is created in our environment. The effects are felt in our state of mind. In the broadcast, the professor did such a great job at creating a conducive environment for someone to feel safe, to feel oriented amidst the noise. And so if we want to bring that fire with us on our journey of self-improvement, while we have to wander and figure ourselves out and it's cold and it's snow, then we have to create an environment, a context that is conducive to that. I think we can build that for us personally based on whatever we resonate with, whatever we love. And so think of moments when you felt calm, when you felt oriented and you felt inspired and excited and passionate, and then ask yourself what produced that. It turns out that the research backs these arguments too. There's a concept called epistemic trust, which refers to whether or not a person feels safe receiving information from a source. When the communication feels manipulative, the mind becomes defensive. So when we're pushed towards something, when a person is chasing us, pressuring us, motivating us to do something out of fear, we automatically become defensive. And what's interesting is that can happen in our mind to ourselves, that we can become defensive of ourselves. In a way, we split in two. A version of us wants to progress and move forward, but the way they go about that is by trying to get rid of the other half of us, the half that's not measuring up. And when you approach self-improvement that way, you split in two. And that conflict, not only does it get anything done, but it creates pain. It creates a lack of self-confidence. Another interesting concept in psychology are the two ways attention operates. You have reactive attention and oriented attention. Reactive attention, you can probably name it, you've felt it. Whenever you wake up in the morning and you're overwhelmed by a to-do list. I've got to take the kids to school, I got to go to work, I got to go get groceries, I got to make dinner. You have demands. And those demands are pressuring you to do something. Through urgency, through that reactive attention, it dominates under pressure. The alternative is oriented. Whenever you've woken up, maybe on vacation, or maybe you've just taken a self-help day, you have things you're going to do, but they're more purposeful. You're excited about them. You're choosing to do them. The oriented attention dominates under controlled, coherent, calm environments. The example of this is with Isaac Newton. Obviously, we know him as the genius that he is. all of the technological and scientific advancements that he made. What's interesting, if you look into his life just a little bit, there's a pattern that emerges. During periods of public scrutiny, disputes, and political pressure, he would talk about these in letters. And in his personal letters, he described obsessive rumination and withdrawal. And what's super interesting is that if you parallel that timeline with the timeline of his scientific breakthroughs, they never align. He was never able to make major breakthroughs when he was in those periods of pressure. Rather, his foundational work on calculus, optics, and gravity occurred in isolation, when he was without evaluation, without performance pressure. These point to the different types of attention. When he was pressurized, that is an environment, and that had a direct influence on his state of mind, which had a direct influence on what he was able to produce with his life. Obviously, Newton's intelligence didn't change, but the conditions of attention did. This matters for self-improvement because think to yourself, if you are in a state of mind that is in chaos, that's pressurized, that's fearful, and you're able to get X, Y, and Z done, imagine what's possible if you're able to come over here in a place that's calm and coherent and oriented, where your attention is focused. Think of what you can create. Yes, self-improvement will be hard. There's a task, a price that you can't cheat yourself out of. The price must be paid. But we as humans, we make it harder on ourselves. To illustrate this, I have a story. It's the story of Jeb Thaw in the Bible. And whether you're religious, whether you're Christian, it doesn't matter. We're just looking at this objectively. But the story of Jeb Thaw is very educational. He's out off to war. He's leading an army, and he makes a covenant, a deal with God. He says, God, I really need your help. I want to be delivered in this battle. I want to be victorious. And he says that if he's victorious in the battle, that when he returns home, he will sacrifice the first thing that comes out of his home to greet him. And the story goes, his army fights and they win. And so obviously Jeb Thaw, he's made this covenant. He's got to uphold his end of the deal. And so he goes home, and you can just imagine it. He's walking toward his house, and out of his home comes his only daughter to greet him. And because of the covenant Jeb Thaw made, his daughter is sacrificed in the name of God. But what's so interesting about this story is that never once does God acknowledge the covenant, agree to it, even ask for it. It was unnecessary. But Jeb Thaw made the covenant based on his perception of the world, based on his idea of success and what he thought it cost. He thought that if I sacrifice something, that God would make this happen. And that sacrifice, it was unnecessary. And so many of us make it harder than it needs to be. Yes, the battle will be fought. Yes, we're trying to gain the victory. But it's like if we're in the forest with the snow and we brought no coat, just us and our t-shirt. We're trudging through. If we're going on the journey, we might as well bring a coat. We might as well bring with us the fire, the feeling of surety and confidence that will help us along the way. So let's get practical. These are great ideas, they're great theories, but how in practice can we shift mental states of mind? How can we go about our self-improvement and gain actual excitement and passion and be able to maintain that on a daily basis? How can we avoid fear, the pressure, the self-hatred to motivate us to change? This is what we'll now get into. And to illustrate the how, I have my final example, and it's a beautiful one that I think everyone will resonate with. And it's an artistic case of Vincent Van Gogh. I've pulled up one of his famous paintings, The Wheat Field with Crows. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but take a moment to look and put on your artist cap and interpret. It was a time when Vincent Van Gogh was using larger brush strokes, so there's not as much detail in the painting, but you can see the image. There's some sort of field. It looks like all the grain or all the grass is moving in one direction, so there's obviously wind. The sky looks not too friendly. There's some darkness, there's some clouds, it looks a little stormy, and there's some birds. And there's also, it looks like, 3 pathways, all of which you don't know where they lead. And it looks like 1, maybe 2, leads to a dead end. And so think for yourself, interpret the painting, what comes to mind. You can comment down below what you think. But there are common interpretations of chaos, confusion, and I love doing this as my favorite practice with artwork, is after you've scanned the image, just kind of gaze at it and see where your vision holds. For me, it's right at the left side, the front of the field. Seems like the safest place to be, maybe. I don't know why. What adds to the meaning and what adds to the depth of this painting is understanding the context. And if you don't know, Vincent Van Gogh, he had a brilliant mind, creative, an amazing artist, and he dealt with a lot of mental health problems in his life. Ultimately, he died of suicide. And this painting was one of the last paintings that he finished, just weeks before his death. This painting, in fact, was painted after Van Gogh left the asylum at St. Remy, and he was very extensive in writing letters. And from those letters being preserved, we know that Vincent Van Gogh, during that time, he would take daily solitary walks in open fields. And so now put yourself in his shoes. Imagine his frame of mind. Imagine going on those walks, walking through the fields, looking up at the sky and seeing the birds. Obviously, the painting depicts not just the birds, the paths, the field, the sky, but an interpretation of them. Those objects all going through a storm. The point that I'm making here is that the context of the painter is reflective of the art that that painter produces, and vice versa. The art is reflective of the painter. And so the chaos that you see in the image, the uncertainty, the wind, the confusion, those were all feelings that Vincent Van Gogh was probably feeling at the time. Imagine being him weeks away from your death in an asylum. Imagine that frame of mind. And we get a peek into what that would have felt like by the art that he produced. The feeling, the perception we have looking at that art is a reflection of him. The lesson here is that we have to think about what we want to create in our life. If you want a beautiful image, if you want happiness, great relationships, financial freedom, who is the painter that can paint that image? In other words, see the success or the circumstance of what you want in your life as the byproduct. The art is a byproduct. The artist, that's the source, that's the goal. So many people get caught up in the art, but they forget the artist. But if you want to create beautiful images in your life, if you want the money and the freedom and the happiness and the great relationships, then you have to go about attaining those things indirectly, seeing them as a byproduct. If you go for those things, you'll be able to create a good image, and that'll be it. You'll be a one and done. But Vincent Van Gogh, he has countless beautiful, amazing art pieces because he was the artist. If your life was a painting right now, what would it look like? What are the themes? What feeling does it portray? What are the highs and lows? Is it dark? Is it light? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it on the break of something beautiful and amazing? Or is it despairing and isolated? That art came from somewhere. We have to focus and understand the source. The concept behind this is the self-determination theory. It's evident in its name and what it means. The theory states that there are 3 requirements in order for someone to self-determine. These are what is required. First, you need autonomy. Then you need competence. And lastly, you need relatedness. Autonomy being the freedom to be able to go and do. Then the competence of whatever you're putting your mind to, you're able to do something. You have the skill set. You have the capacity to accomplish that thing. And then relatedness. In order to self-determine, you need safety, you need connection, you need encouragement along the way. Like Vincent Van Gogh, we can't disconnect the art from the artist. And so often, I've found in my personal life, in self-improvement, we focus so heavily on the art, we focus so heavily on the outcome, that we taint and we manipulate and we coerce the artist But the natural law of how things work is that the art reflects the artist. And so if you want to create beauty, if you want to create truth and abundance and happiness, stop making things harder than they need to be. Figure out what is the environment, the context that creates your best state of mind, and then do your best to systematize that environment to help you have oriented thinking, to be calm and excited and passionate and have hope and belief that you can do it. I believe you can. I'll leave you with 2 final questions. The first is, what environments are shaping your emotional state while you're trying to improve? This is the current. Where are you at? If you feel a positive emotional state, what produces that? And if you sometimes feel a negative emotional state, more fear and more urgent and more shameful, what produces that? The second question is, how can you then cultivate an environment that produces calm, that produces focus, and that produces confidence? That journey will be individual for you. And that's the fun of it, that this is self-discovery. And I know that we can do it. I appreciate you joining me today. If you haven't already, I would ask, please, if you would subscribe. It's the biggest way you can support me to grow this podcast. And it's my promise that I will dedicate my time and energy to improving, to make this podcast the best that it can. I'll improve as a public speaker. I'll improve in my topics and in the research. And I will do all with integrity. I'll send you on your way with a quote from Vincent Van Gogh. He says, "If you hear a voice within you say you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced." Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.